Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to another episode of Albums Worth Exploring. So this is where I like to collect together a bunch of different albums that may have run under the radar at the time, don't presently get enough attention in a band's vast catalog, or they're just like a one-off side project that fell on deaf ears at the time. The thing is, all of these albums deserve more attention and all of these albums are definitely worth exploring, and we're going to do just that. But before we dive into it, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with another episode of Albums Worth Exploring. So the way I like to do this is pick 5 or 6 albums. We got 5 here today. We run through it by year and by genre. So we're actually covering quite a wide swath of albums from 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spanning about 30 years almost, 28 to be exact, in terms of the numbers of when these albums came out. First one up, we're going to start in 1972. If you're a fan of Rolling Stones or the Beatles, solo era material type stuff, things of that nature, you'll probably like this. Bobby Keys. It is a self-titled solo album, one and only from him. If you can see on the cover there, he's holding a saxophone. He's probably most famous for having been a session sideman as a saxophonist for the Rolling Stones, but he played with a lot of different artists, including George Harrison, John Lennon, and artists like that. The thing that grabbed me about this, I didn't know a lot about this album when I was buying it. One, it's on the Wounded Bird label. Wounded Bird is a good label. If they're putting out something as a reissue, in my opinion, it's worth picking up. It's worth checking out and exploring, and I've had very, very good luck picking things up like that. So looking at this, though, it always runs the guest list that's on here, or guest musicians, I should say. So on here, we've got George Harrison on guitars, Ringo Starr on drums, Dave Mason on guitars from Traffic. Of course, he also played with Fleetwood Mac briefly. We've got the whole band Mountain on here, Leslie West on guitars, Felix Pappalardi on bass, and Corky Laing on drums. We've got Nicky Hopkins on keyboards, who also played with the Rolling Stones, The Who, also John Lennon, George Harrison, to name a few. We've got some other people on here I'm not as familiar with. Jim Price, Jim Gordon, Mike Utley, and Carl Radley, all named on the back of this. All must be somebody important. But I flipped this over and I saw George Harrison, Ringo Starr, Leslie West. Oh, Jack Bruce of Cream is on here. And I saw that and I just said, well, if those guys are playing on here, this must be a great album, and it certainly was. It's all instrumental. The lead instrument on it is saxophone, but there's plenty of guitar soloing and other stuff as well, so it's very, very good. If you like 70s era Rolling Stones music, I would tell you this is definitely worth picking up and exploring. All right, next one up, we're going to jump further ahead here and sort of skip late into the 80s, but just some good straight up 80s rock and roll stuff. Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols made 2 solo albums. This is his second one here, Fire and Gasoline, came out in 1989. And so this would be an artist, if you like sort of like biker rock, I would call it, bands like Circus of Power or The Boys. Try to think of some other ones like TSOL, True Sons of Liberty. Their later era stuff, not the early punk stuff, but the later stuff when they were more of a straight up rock band, hard rock band. This album here, very much in that vein. Not, don't think of this as Sex Pistols. It is definitely not that. This is straight up rock and roll. This is him coming off of having played for Iggy Pop on a couple albums. I think he played on Cold Metal and one before that one. So very much in the vein of that, but even more straight up rock and roll. Very good. What grabbed me about this one back in the day was that it is co-produced by Ian Astbury of The Cult. But beyond that, Ian Astbury guests on some of this as well. And even further than that on here, we've got co-writes by Nikki Sixx of Motley Crue. We've got, let's see, some of the other co-writes on here, pretty amazing. Angry Anderson from Rose Tattoo, had to think for a second there. We've also got a cover of a Sex Pistols tune, I Did You Know Wrong. We've got 2 co-writes by Ian Astbury on the song Get Ready and on Leave Your Shoes On. And then we've got a cover of Suffragette City from David Bowie on here. So really, really good stuff. Great guest artists are on this thing. Great co-writes are on this thing. It's just an album that ran under the radar. I didn't find it till many years later as a cult fan, realizing that this had some stuff from Ian Astbury, and it made me check it out that way. But very, very good album and definitely worth exploring. Probably going to say that a bunch in this. All right, now we move into 1990 and Richie Kotzen, Fever Dream. All right, this is on the Shrapnel label. He had made one shred album, instrumental, and I don't know what was the change here. Maybe he wanted this all along and he kind of had to make the shred album to be able to make this, but he put together a band and he made an album that had vocals and everything on it. But this is full on, like, you know, sort of that sound of the time, the glam metal sound of the time. But if you're a fan of Mr. Big when it featured Richie Kotzen, or of Poison, their album Native Tongue, which featured Richie Kotzen, this album here you're going to love. And same thing if you're a fan of Winery Dogs. So for me, Winery Dogs is a very close representation of Mr. Big. So I generally see that as, you know, if you're a Mr. Big fan, you're loving Winery Dogs and vice versa. And if you're a fan of those, you're going to love this. When I first found this album, I couldn't believe how good it was and how much it sounded like all of that. And just how did this album not get recognition the way that these other ones have? So yeah, dig back in, check this out. If you're a fan of Richie Kotzen and you've never checked it out, if you're just a fan of good, soulful blues rock and roll, that's either in the vein of, as I said, Mr. Big, Poison, when, you know, Richie Kotzen was part of it, or the Winery Dogs, because the Winery Dogs are working on a new album, but they've only made 2, and if you want some more, that's the way to go for it. All right, now moving on fully into the glam metal thing of the time, a 1991 album that made some buzz at the time, but just doesn't get the love thereafter because they only made the one album and it folded so quickly. Contraband. And those of you that know about this album know what I'm talking about, and I'm sure you're sitting there pumping your fist in the air right now, very excited about this because this is such a great album. It just deserves so much more attention. Now, you can, if you don't know anything about the band, and you can see on here, we've got road cases, and they've all got logos from the members that make up this super group here. So we've got LA Guns, we've got Vixen, we've got Michael Schenker Group, Shark Island, and Rat. And if we flip it over, now we can see the members in here. So we've got Michael Schenker over here. We've got Richard Black from Shark Island. We've got Bobby Blotzer of Rat, Cher Peterson from Vixen, and Tracy Guns of LA Guns, all making an album together in 1991. This thing here has some covers, a few originals on it, but it all sounds very much like these guys put it together. It doesn't sound, even when they do the cover, they made it their own. And I think that's part of why this album here has held up so well for me, is that when I first got this and listened to it, I didn't realize some of these songs on here were covers. But at the time, they put out the song All the Way from Memphis, which is Mott the Hoople and or Ian Hunter. I forget who, but you know, Ian Hunter was in both of those. So, but it's an Ian Hunter written song. And then the other one on here was Loud Guitars, Fast Cars, and Wild Wild Livin' on here. And they've also got a song on here, Bad for Each Other, which was a Shark Island song, a ballad. And Shark Island didn't get enough love either. They're a band that should really be in here, and maybe one of these days I'll pop them in here and talk about them. But they do a cover of that song, and since Richard Black is in here, I kind of feel like it's an original in that sense, but technically a cover from Shark Island. So anyways, great album. If you're just looking for some great up glam metal from that late era of it in 1991, you know, when they had shed a lot of the polish and everything and were just doing the straight up rock sound, that's a great one. All right, and then closing things off, we're going to move all the way into the 2000s, in fact, just 2000, but we're going to come in on the tail end of grunge and alternative rock there and talk about Unified Theory. their self-titled debut. And if you don't know, they actually have a second album that they made and recorded that never got released and eventually was released digitally only a few years back, I think. And so there are 2 albums out there by this band. If you're like me and you loved the band at the time and thought they only made the one and now find out they made a second one, your day is pretty good, right? But if you don't know who Unified Theory are, they were a sort of super group. And let me open up the liner notes here, the credits here, just to make sure I'm getting this right. So we've got, find the right page. Okay, so we've got Chris Shin on vocals. And at the time, I didn't know who he was. And he did come from a smaller band that I was very unaware about. But Chris Shin went on to do a lot of different things. He had made solo albums and stuff, and he sung for different bands, including live, taking over for Ed Kowalczyk after he left the band. And so for me, Unified Theory has even moved up in the ranks because these guys in here have gone on to do other things since this, making those guys more popular and whatnot. So finding an album by them after the fact is kind of cool. But you got Chris Shin singing. Then we got Brad Smith and Christopher Thorne. Those 2 guys, bassist and guitarist from Blind Melon. So this was the first project they were doing after Blind Melon, after Shannon Hoon had died. So that was one of the reasons that I was aware of it at the time and followed it and so forth. Then we've got the drummer on here, Dave Krusen, from Pearl Jam, their original drummer. So very cool to get those 4 guys in a lineup here for Unified Theory. And it's very much in the vein of the Blind Melon stuff, but with much more soulful vocals on it. And you just got a cool powerhouse drummer there behind it from Dave, making it again an album worth exploring. And there's the guys on the backside of it. Unified Theory, check them out. And again, if you dig that, you've got 2 albums to go find by them. So there you go. 5 albums here, all really good stuff that, in my opinion, ran under the radar. Doesn't get enough attention today, even if it's just in its respective field. I may think in terms of the glam metal stuff, those 2 artists I talked about there should be getting talked about, but they don't. Richie Canyon has moved up the ranks, but his solo work barely gets talked about and so forth. So here you go, 5 albums, all worth exploring. Do yourself a favor, go check them out. I think you'll be very happy and glad that you did. I think there's something for everyone in that today. All right, have a good one, take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.